Here is how I accidentally convinced my entire neighborhood that I discovered a lost civilization, and why I now have to live the rest of my life as either a fraud or the world's leading expert on a culture I invented in my backyard to hide a bad grade. We are going to start off with one of the most absurd situations I have ever created for myself, when one terrible algebra grade turned into a full archaeological hoax that somehow got published in the local newspaper and almost ruined my entire family. It is late May in the suburbs, and I am holding my final report card of the year with the kind of dread usually reserved for people opening medical test results. There, printed in cold, bureaucratic ink, is a D- in Algebra 2. Not a C, not even a D minus, which is the grade equivalent of your teacher writing, "I guess you technically showed up on your transcript." Now, my parents had a very clear policy about summer privileges. Anything below a C meant no video games until September, which in teenage years is basically a death sentence. I had exactly one plan to survive this, and it involved making sure that report card never made it into the house. So I did what any rational person would do. I buried it. I went into the backyard after dinner, dug a hole next to the fence behind the garden shed, and put that report card 6 inches underground, like I was hiding evidence of a crime. I smoothed the dirt back over, patted it down, and walked inside feeling like I had just executed the perfect cover-up. My parents asked if I had my report card. I told them the school was mailing them. They believed me. Everything was fine. For about 18 hours. The next morning, I woke up to my mom yelling my full legal name from the backyard, which is never a good sign. I went outside and there was Buster, our beagle, sitting in the middle of the lawn with my report card in his mouth, wagging his tail like he had just retrieved a duck. The corner was chewed, there was dirt all over it, and my D- in Algebra 2 was still perfectly visible. I told my mom I must have dropped it outside by accident. She looked at me like I was the dumbest person alive, but she let it go. I took the report card back, waited until she went to work, and buried it again. This time, deeper. This time, in a different spot. This time, it would stay hidden. Buster dug it up the next day. I do not know how he knew. I do not know why he cared. But that dog treated my report card like it was the most valuable object on the planet. He brought it to the back door like a gift. My dad found it sitting on the porch mat, covered in slobber and soil. I told him Buster must have stolen it from my backpack. My dad told me to keep better track of my stuff. I was running out of excuses. I needed a solution that would make Buster stop digging, and I needed it fast. That is when I had the worst idea of my life. If I made the burial site look like something important, something official, something you were not supposed to dig up, then maybe Buster would leave it alone. Or better yet, if someone else found it first, they would not know what it was. So I decided to turn my backyard into an archaeological site. I went into the garage and grabbed a bunch of random junk. I found an old yellow bouncy ball I spray painted gold. I took a butter knife from the kitchen, bent it with pliers, and soaked it in salt and vinegar overnight to make it look rusted. I grabbed some rocks from the driveway and painted them with my sister's glitter nail polish. I took a ceramic bowl I made in 7th grade art class and smashed it into pieces. Then I went back outside, dug a new hole, and buried everything together in a grid pattern, with the report card in the center. I used sticks and string to mark out a grid like I had seen in documentaries. I even wrote on some of the rocks with a Sharpie, copying equations from my failed algebra test because I thought it would look like ancient writing. Then I waited. My plan was that if anyone found this mess, they would think it was some kind of art project or a prank and just leave it alone. What I did not expect was for Mr. Henderson, my neighbor, to see the grid in my backyard and ask what I was working on. I panicked. I told him I thought I found something weird while digging, and I was marking it out to investigate later. He got excited. Mr. Henderson was retired and extremely bored. He loved local history. He asked if he could take a look. I said sure, because what else was I going to say? He crouched down, looked at the rocks with the Sharpie equations, and said this looked like some kind of primitive writing system. I nodded. He asked if he could take a photo. I said okay. He posted it in the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, Possible historical find in local backyard, looking for expert opinions. By that evening, 15 people had commented. By the next morning, someone had tagged Dr. Alistair Finch, the head of our local historical society, who showed up at my house with a camera and a notebook. Now I want to be very clear. I did not mean for any of this to happen. But when Dr. Finch asked me how I discovered the site, I told him I was digging to plant a garden and I hit something hard. When he asked if I had moved anything, I said no. When he asked if I understood the significance of what I might have found, I said I was not sure. All of that was technically true. He spent an hour photographing everything. He took notes. He measured distances. He looked at my glitter-painted pebbles and called them ceremonial stones. He looked at my spray-painted bouncy ball and called it a devotional object. He looked at my rusted butter knife and said it could be a ritual blade. Then he looked at the report card. It was muddy and torn, and the ink had bled from being underground, but you could still see the equations I had written on the rocks next to it. Dr. Finch said this was the most important piece. He called it a star chart. He said the writing system appeared to be a numeric language, possibly used for celestial observation. He said the arrangement of the objects suggested a burial site for a religious leader. He asked if he could remove the items for further study. I said yes, because again, what else was I going to say? He carefully bagged everything, including my report card, and told me he would be in touch. 3 days later, the local newspaper ran a story with the headline, "Local Teen Discovers Evidence of Pre-Colonial Settlement." There was a photo of me standing next to the hole in my backyard. There was a photo of the report card, now labelled as the Ethelgardian Celestial Map. Dr. Finch had named the entire civilization. He called them the Ethelgardians, after what he thought was a symbol on one of the rocks, but was actually just the logo from my old skateboard that I had traced because I ran out of ideas. The article said the find could rewrite our understanding of early settlements in the region. It said the numeric language showed a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy. It said the culture appeared to have worshipped a solar deity based on the golden orb found at the site. My mom put the article on the fridge. My dad told everyone at work. My sister was mad that I was getting attention. I was trapped. See, I could not tell anyone the truth now, because the truth was that I had lied to a historical society, wasted their time and resources, and accidentally committed what I was pretty sure was some kind of fraud. But I also could not keep pretending, because Dr. Finch wanted more information. He wanted to know if there were other sites nearby. He wanted to know if I had found any other objects. He wanted me to give a talk at the next Historical Society meeting. So I did the only thing I could do. I went deeper into the lie. I started researching how to fake historical artifacts. I learned that soaking paper in coffee makes it look old. I learned that burying clay in dirt for a few days gives it a weathered texture. I learned that if you use enough vague language, you can make anything sound ancient. I made more objects. I buried them in different parts of the yard. I told Dr. Finch I had done some more digging and found additional evidence. He came back with 2 other people from the Historical Society. They excavated my backyard like it was a real site. They found a clay tablet I had made with more fake equations. They found a necklace I had strung together with beads from a broken bracelet. They found a small figurine I had carved out of soap and aged with dirt. Every single thing I planted, they catalogued. Every single lie I told, they wrote down. The Historical Society published a report. They called it the Ethelgardians of Suburbania, evidence of an early cul-de-sac period civilization. They created a timeline. They created a language guide, translating my algebra equations into phrases like, the sun and moon divided brings scant harvest, which was just the equation x over y equals d minus. They displayed the artifacts in the local library in a glass case. My parents were so proud, they donated $500 to the Historical Society and bought a climate-controlled display case for the Celestial Map, which again was my report card. I had successfully hidden my bad grade. But now I was living in a nightmare. I had to memorize facts about a civilization I made up. I had to pretend to be humble when people called me a young historian. I had to nod seriously when Dr. Finch explained his theories about Ethelgardian trade routes. I started keeping a notebook with all my lies written down so I would not contradict myself. I made up a religion. I made up a calendar system. I made up an explanation for why we had never found Ethelgardian sites anywhere else, which was that they were a small, isolated group that collapsed due to resource scarcity. I was one question away from falling apart at all times. Then things got worse. Mr. Calloway, my algebra teacher, saw the article. He saw the photos of the so-called celestial map. He recognized his own test questions. He did not say anything publicly, but he pulled me aside after class and asked if there was anything I wanted to tell him. I said no. He said the equations on the artifacts looked very familiar. I said ancient cultures probably used similar math. He said it was interesting that the writing system included the exact same problems from our final exam. I said it must be a coincidence. He stared at me for a very long time and then said he hoped I learned something valuable from all this. I did not know if that meant he was going to turn me in or if he was letting me off with a warning. Then the art teacher, Miss Pemberton, stopped me in the hallway and said she was so glad my old coil pot project was being appreciated, even if it was in a weird way. She had recognized the ceremonial bowl. I told her that must be a different bowl. She said it had my initials on the bottom. I stopped going to school events. But the worst part was not the fear of getting caught. The worst part was that people kept believing me. Neighbors started talking about how they always felt like the area had ancient energy. Someone said they found a rock in their yard that might also be Ethelgardian. Someone else said their grandmother had always told stories about old settlers in the area, which definitely meant the Ethelgardians were real. Dr. Finch submitted some of the clay pieces for carbon dating, which was when I realized I was actually going to get caught, because you cannot carbon date clay, but the lab could definitely tell it was made last month. I decided I had to confess. I wrote out a full confession letter explaining everything. I was going to leave it on Dr. Finch's desk at the Historical Society, but when I got there, I saw the display case with all my fake artifacts inside, and I saw a group of elementary school kids on a field trip learning about the Ethelgardians. And I saw a plaque with my name on it, thanking me for my contribution to local history. I could not do it. I went home and buried the confession letter in the backyard, because apparently that is just my solution to every problem now. The carbon dating results came back inconclusive, which saved me. Dr. Finch said it was because the soil conditions were not ideal for preservation. The lie continued. I gave the talk at the Historical Society meeting. I spoke in vague terms about discovery and patience and respecting history. People applauded. Someone asked if I was going to study archaeology in college. I said maybe. I graduated high school. I went to college. I moved to a different state, but the Ethelgardian exhibit is still in the local library. It is still in the Historical Society archives. My parents still have the newspaper clipping on their wall. And I still have not told anyone the truth, because at this point, I have committed so hard to the bit that confessing would be more humiliating than just living with it forever. I am now officially the discoverer of a lost civilization that I made up to hide a D- in algebra. And somehow, that is still less embarrassing than admitting I failed math.